Okay, so we didn't get to everything in class today, and I'm going to try to walk through all of the stuff in the Bressler that we didn't talk about. Parts of this are going to feel disjointed because I'm skipping over the parts that we did talk about in class and focusing on what didn't come up. First of all, let me just point out that at the beginning of the chapter, there's a good list or summary of what happens when we switch from one transcendental signified to the next. And I'm going to assume that you watched the mini lecture and were in class and know what a transcendental signified is. In the middle of page 89, Bressler writes, these leading articulators of postmodernism assert that modernity failed because it searched for an external point of reference. An external point of reference would be something that touched the world, referred to the world, pointed to the world, God, reason, and science, among others, on which to build a philosophy. For these postmodern thinkers, there is no such point of reference because there is no ultimate truth. That could just as easily go the other way, ultimate truth, because there's no point of reference, or inherently unifying element in the universe and thus no ultimate reality. That doesn't mean that we are totally divorced from the fact that I'm holding a pencil or something. It just means that what pencil might mean depends on whether there's a God, for example. I'm going to get to this more slowly in a minute. Okay, so skipping past the stuff on structuralism from last time and getting to deconstruction. Where's the first part that I wanted to point out? Okay, on 109, Derrida talks about how signs have to relate, signifieds signs have to relate to other signifiers signs in order to be meaningful. I kind of talked to you about this in the mini lecture. As a result, we search for some transcendental signified that would lock the system in place, that would refer to, point to something real. I talked about this in class briefly as logocentrism being our desire for that thing. So here we get another list, which I think I wrote or mentioned also in the mini lecture. God, reason, origin, being, essence, truth, humanity, beginning, end, and self, to name just a few. That's on page 110. Those are things that could lock the system into place if they actually pointed to or referred to the world. Derrida is arguing that there is no such thing, and that the evidence that we've moved from one to another, to another, to another, that is evidence of there not being one. We just choose another one when the current one falls apart, which is fine. He just wants to point out that that means there isn't a true thing, because we keep changing what the true one would be in this list, or there might be a lot more. I'm going to talk about binaries in just a second. Let me talk about phonocentrism as an example, though. Phonocentrism, which he talks about on page 111, is our assumption or belief that speech is better than writing. This depends upon our binary opposition, our belief in binary oppositions, that speech and writing are separate things, and that speech is better than or superior to writing. Okay. He says that we think it's better because speech implies presence and writing implies absence. What he wants to do is turn all binaries or transcendental signifieds and their signifiers into a binary that represents presence as being the thing that's preferred and absence as being the thing that's not preferred. So if God is preferred, that means God is present as opposed to absent, and humankind is lacking divinity, godness. If reason is preferred to, I don't know, intuition or an appeal to authority, then reason is, it exists, it is present. And intuition or the appeal to authority would be an absence of reason. This metaphysics of presence is crucial to the binaries that he sets up and shows us how he wants to undo them, shows us how he wants to either flip them or talk about ways in which they don't actually work very well. So on page 112, we get to a section on archywriting. And in that section, but on page 113, toward the bottom, Bressler talks about free play and undecidability. Free play and play, which I mentioned in class, is crucial for post-structuralists, but particularly people who identify as deconstructionalists, because play is the way that language has to work. We talked about différence in class, where meaning is, signifiers are different from, or signifieds are different from, but that meaning is also deferred from one sign to another. That gives us a chance to play. That creates play in two different ways. First of all, it gives us a chance to play just with language, and playing is fun. And second, it gives the structure some play. You might say there's some play or some give in the structure. Okay, free play is what Derrida is celebrating when it comes to the way language works. Undecidability is another way of saying free play, sort of, although undecidability is sometimes, or could be called aporia, A-P-O-R-I-A, which just means this lack or gap in the text when we can't lock down its meaning. Okay. Archywriting is language that's unhindered by the speech writing binary. If there's a way to think of language as being before it's tied to the binary, and that would be language in opposition to logocentrism, language that allowed for free play, that didn't need a center. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit of supplementation and différence. Différence we talked about in class. To answer one of the questions that came up in class a little bit more thoroughly, on the near the bottom of 117, like language itself, texts have no outside reference or transcendental signifieds. What an author thinks he or she says or means in a text may be quite different from what is actually written. This is a way in which people might find it similar to reader-oriented theories, which I think we went over a lot. Deconstructionists, therefore, look for places in which the text, where the author misspeaks or loses control of language and said what was supposedly not meant to be said. These slips of language often occur in questions, figurative language, and strong declarations. I would say that the slips, like I used Freudian slip as an example, but misspeak is more general than that, it allows for slips in language where the example here is something that turns out to be ambiguous and maybe funny, and that might turn up in a text as well. But another way of thinking about that is just the same way sort of that the New Critics did, which is that the author loses the text. The author is no longer in control of the text. And misspeak is another way of saying that language escapes from intention, I think. Okay. There's one other thing I wanted to point out. No, there's not. There's not one other thing I wanted to point out because I already put an announcement to you, which is that the Derrida is really hard. If anything I've said doesn't make sense, of course, send me questions, or also we can talk about it at the beginning of class on Monday, especially if you're not sure what a transcendental signified is. That's the thing I need you to take away. Okay, I forgot to do a 2-minute version at the beginning. Sorry, Hunter.